Hello, my name is Susan Stewart. I'm the Program Manager of the State Performance Plan Technical Assistance Project, or SPP-TAP. SPP-TAP is funded by the California Department of Education through a contract with the Napa County Office of Education. This is one of 4 recordings introducing you to significant disproportionality. This series of recordings is foundational to understanding what significant disproportionality is, why your LEA has been identified as significantly disproportionate, and why this work is so important. You can access the rest of the recordings from the Significant Disproportionality page on the spptap.org website. This particular recording is about the federal requirements and California implementation of those requirements to address significant disproportionality. In a moment, you'll be hearing from 2 Focused Monitoring and Technical Assistance, or FMTA consultants of the California Department of Education Special Education Division, Keyshawn Thorntona and Sean Howland.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I am Keyshawn Thorntona. But before I get into any federal requirements and California's implementation process, I wanted to introduce the CDE's team. Every significantly disproportionate LEA in California is assigned a focused monitoring and technical assistance consultant from the California Department of Education, also referred to as CDE. These consultants support and monitor the assigned LEAs and is the LEA's point of contact at CDE. We have 2 units that support and monitor significantly disproportionate LEAs, and both of these units work closely together. The first unit is Focused Monitoring and Technical Assistance. Unit 1, we also refer to ourselves as FMTA. So FMTA 1 includes Barbara Gaskin-Wintle, who is our education administrator and leads us. We have Brett Gillespie, Andrea Gallagher, Josh Rucker, Keyshawn Thorntona, me, and Katrina Tupper. We also have Unit 4, headed by Jack Brimhall, oversees Jasmine Ayton, Aaron Christensen, Sean Howland, Baron Reynolds, James Durgan, and Lorraine Garcia. And we'll be hearing from Sean in just a moment. So before I discuss the history of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, I wanted to remind everyone that the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also referred to as IDEA, provides the legal mandate for the processes that we're discussing here today. IDEA's purpose is to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that meets their unique needs and prepares them for further education, employment, and independent living. It aims to ensure that the rights of children with disabilities and parents of such children are protected. We also know that individually and collectively, we have an obligation to ensure that each and every student is served and protected. When we see disparities in outcomes for students based on race and ethnicity, it's not just a legal mandate. It's a moral imperative that moves us to take action to correct this. Now, let me walk you through the history timeline. In 1975, that was the first time students with disabilities were afforded a free, appropriate public education. In 1990, it was reauthorized to the IDEA we know today. The purpose of the 2004 amendment was to protect civil rights given to students based on race and ethnicity, and also included early intervening services for children not currently identified as needing special education services, but who need additional academic and behavioral supports to succeed in the general education environment. This was due to the inequities within the educational system based on national data that demonstrated that students receive different services based on race and ethnicity. The more recent 2016 amendment established more consistency in these protections, as they were great variation on how state departments of education monitor disproportionality and significant disproportionality. I'm going to turn it on over to Sean Howland.
Thank you, Keyshawn. I'm Sean Howland, and I'm going to talk about the federal requirements for our work. State Performance Plan Indicators. United States Code Section 1416, subsection A, subsection 3, requires California to monitor special education outcomes through 17 quantifiable and qualitative indicators. 4 of these indicators are focused on disproportionality. The IDEA 2004 provides for the identification of districts with significant disproportionality. So what is disproportionality? IDEA focused on the overrepresentation of a particular racial or ethnic group in one of the 4 areas: disciplinary actions, more restrictive educational environments, special education identification in general, and special education identification in specific disability categories. So let's take a closer look at these elements. Discipline. Students with disabilities by race and ethnicity suspended or expelled. 2 of the main areas that we see most often are students with disabilities who are suspended greater than 10 days outside of school and students with disabilities with any discipline. Placement. 2 key areas are students with disabilities by race and ethnicity spending less than 40% of their day in the general education environment. Another area is students with disabilities by race and ethnicity in separate schools or residential facilities. 2 other areas within the state performance plan are indicators 9 and 10. Indicator 9 is disproportionality overall, and that is that overrepresentation by one race or ethnicity compared to other groups. SPP-10, or disproportionality by disability, is that percent of racial and ethnic disproportionality by disability. Now, when we talk about significant disproportionality, this is the overrepresentation in one or more of the 4 areas we have just talked about, and it's in that same area within the same population for 3 consecutive years. For the 2024 cycle, these data come from the 2021 school year, as well as the 21-22 and 22-23 school years. The disproportionality system. So once an LEA has disproportionality, the hope, of course, is to cycle out of it. However, after 3 years, an LEA will then cycle into being identified as significantly disproportionate. And this is based on those 3 years of calculations. There are fiscal implications, as well as the requirement for an improvement plan. Disproportionality versus significant disproportionality. When we look at this table, we see some key distinctions between the processes for LEAs identified as disproportionate versus those identified as being significantly disproportionate. Both identifications are made based on special education data, but once an LEA is identified as SIGDIS, the focus moves into general education. The intent is to address the factors that contribute to disproportionality in a preventative manner by providing comprehensive, coordinated, early intervening services focused primarily on the group of students with inequitable outcomes. It requires a root cause analysis and systematic improvements in the general education environment that will result in improved outcomes for the impacted student group based on race and ethnicity. As we further look into the regulations for this, when we look at the Code of Federal Regulations, section 300.646, we see that this section requires the set aside of 15% of funds for the activities related to address factors contributing to the significant disproportionality. When we take a look at the Code of Federal Regulations, section 300.646, we see that these factors may include, among other identified factors, a lack of access to scientifically based instruction, economic, cultural, or linguistic barriers to appropriate identification or placement in particular educational settings, inappropriate use of disciplinary removals, lack of access to appropriate diagnostic screenings, differences in academic achievement levels, and policies, practices, or procedures that contribute to the significant disproportionality. The policies, practices, and procedures review is different than the traditional compliance review. This review is to identify any policies, practices, and/or procedures that are contributing factors to significant disproportionality. Now, with the use of these funds, they are reserved to serve children from age 3 through grade 12, particularly, but not exclusively, children in those groups that were significantly over-identified, with particular emphasis on students in kindergarten through grade 3. Transitional kindergarten is considered kindergarten and can include preschool children. Also, keep in mind, these services are not exclusively to be used for students with disabilities. And now I'm going to turn it over to Keyshawn.
Thank you, Sean. SIM for SIGDIS is part of our overall monitoring system, referred to as SIM. But there are some differences between SIM and SIM for SIGDIS that are specific to the federal regulations regarding significant disproportionality. However, the timelines are the same for both the SIM and SIM for SIGDIS. The LEAs who are identified as significantly disproportionate are required to develop and implement their plans in accordance with the federal regulations and have unique differences. SIM for SIGDIS is part of our overall monitoring system, referred to as SIM. But there are some differences between SIM and SIM for SIGDIS that are specific to the federal regulations regarding significant disproportionality. However, the timelines are the same for both the SIM and SIM for SIGDIS. The LEAs who are identified as significantly disproportionate are required to develop and implement their plans in accordance with the federal regulations and have unique differences than LEAs that are solely being monitored due to their low performance on indicators unrelated to significant disproportionality. LEAs will be required to develop a SIM plan for significant disproportionality in order to provide comprehensive coordinated early intervening services, CSACE. The development of the plan is consistent with improvement science, and this plan is developed to determine the contributing factors and address those contributing factors that are identified through the qualitative and quantitative data review. LEAs are also required to set aside 15% of IDEA funds for CSACE activities. Although the data derives from special education data, the 15% is to address contributing factors prior to the referral for special education eligibility. It is important to realize that this is a district-wide plan addressing general education and requires the involvement from the general education partners. After the plan is approved, the LEA will be required to submit quarterly progress and expenditure reports that focus on the implementation progress as well as data to support student outcomes. LEAs will be provided 10 hours of work with a TA facilitator to help jumpstart the development of the plan. Thank you for taking the time to listen to both me and Sean on the federal requirements and CDE's implementation process for significantly disproportionate LEAs.
Thank you, Keyshawn and Sean. SPP-TAP will be providing a series of required virtual and in-person meetings for LEAs newly identified as significantly disproportionate. If you are new to the SIM for SIGDIS process, you are required to participate in these meetings that I will discuss next. If you're working on a continuing SIM for SIGDIS plan, you are welcome, but not required, to participate in the meetings, which will assist LEAs in understanding how significant disproportionality is addressed in the compliance and improvement monitoring system known as SIM for SIGDIS. The first required virtual event will be held April 2nd from 12 to 1:30. More information about who from your LEA should attend this meeting and the registration link are located on the SPP-TAP.org website on the Significant Disproportionality page. The first required virtual event will be held April 2nd from 12 to 1:30. More information about who from your LEA should attend this meeting and the registration link are located on the SPP-TAP.org website on the Significant Disproportionality page. Between April 11th and April 25th, SPP-TAP will be holding in-person meetings in 6 locations in California. Local educational agencies are only required to attend one of the in-person meetings. More information and the registration link will also be on the Significant Disproportionality page on the SPP-TAP.org website. The second virtual meeting will be held on June 11th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. More information about the meeting and the registration link are also located on the Significant Disproportionality page on the SPP-TAP.org website. As a reminder, the remaining recordings in this Introduction to Significant Disproportionality series are also located on that same webpage. On the screen, you'll see contact information for both CDE and SPP-TAP. Please don't hesitate to contact us if you have questions. Thank you.